This flesh was seeded from no foreign grain, but Pennsylvania and Kentucky wheat. And it has soaked in California rain, and 5 years tempered in New England sleet. To strive at last against an alien proof, and by the changes of an alien moon, to build again that blue American roof over a half-forgotten battle tune, and call unsurely from the haunted ground armies of shadows, and the shadows sound.
Captain Ball was a Yankee slaver, blow, blow, blow the man down. He traded in Negroes and loved his Savior. Give me some time to blow the man down.
The captain closed the Bible carefully, putting it down as if his fingers loved it. Then he turned. Mr. Mate.
Yes, sir.
I think while this weather lasts, we'd better get them on deck as much as we can. They keep better that way. Besides, he added, unsmiling, she's begun to stink already. Well, the trade, he said, the trade's no damn perfume shop.
I'm afraid we'll lose some more of the women, said the mate.
Well, they're a scratch lot, said the skipper. Any sickness?
Just the usual, sir.
The Lord is merciful, said the skipper. His voice was wholly sincere. An old ship's bell hung in the steeple of a meeting house. Well, you'd better take another look-see, Mr. Mate.
Lantern in hand, he went down to the hold. Each time he went, he had a trick of trying to shut the pores of his body against the stench, by force of will, by thinking of salt and flowers, but it was always useless. He kept thinking, when I get back home, when I get a bath and clean food, when I get my shore clothes on, and one of those shirts out of the linen closet that smells of lavender, black even then, will my skin smell black? The mate made himself stare until the eyes dropped. Then he turned back to the companionway. His forehead was hot and sweaty. He wiped it off. But then the rough cloth of his sleeve smelt black.
The captain shut the Bible as he came in. Well, Mr. Mate?
All quiet, sir.
The captain looked at him sharply. Sit down, he said in a bark. You're young for this trade, mister, and that's a fact. I get my sailing orders from the Lord. He touched the Bible. And it's down there, Mr. Dunderpam, bond service, a sweat at their breasts. I tell you, miss, good pay, but it's the Lord's work, too. We're spreading the Lord's seed, spreading his seed. His hand made the outflung motion of a sower, and the mate, staring, seemed to hear the slight patter of fallen seeds on fertile ground. Black storehouse, falling and falling on American earth.
Oh, Lordy Jesus, won't you come and find me? They put me in jail, Lord, way down in the Won't you send me a prophet, just one of your prophets, like Moses and Aaron, Lord, to get me some
Horses of anger, trampling horses of anger, trampling behind the sky in ominous cadence, beat of the heavy hooves like metal on metal, trampling something down.
Jack Elliott had been out all day alone, except for his new gun and Ned the setter, the old wise dog with autumn in his eyes, who stepped the fallen leaves so delicately they barely rustled. Elliott trampled them down. He'd meant to hunt, but he let the gun rest on his shoulder. It was enough to feel the cool air of the last of Indian summer blowing continually across his cheek. Jack Elliott felt that turning of the year stir in his blood like drowsy fiddle music, and knew that he was glad to be Connecticut-born. So, with his back against a tree, he stared at the pure golden feathers in the west until the sunset flowed into his heart. There was a fairy hush. Then something broke the peace.
Like wind it was, the flutter of rising wind. But then it grew until it was the rushing of winged stallions, distant and terrible, trampling beyond the sky.
Meanwhile, in Concord, Emerson and Thoreau talked of an ideal state so purely framed it never could exist. Meanwhile, in Boston, Minister Higginson and Dr. Howe waited for news about a certain project that had to do with Pikes and Harper's Ferry. Meanwhile, in Georgia, Clay Wingate dreamed, riding back through the Georgia fall to the white-pillared porch of Wingate Hall.
Fall of the possum, fall of the coon, and a lop-eared hound dog baying the moon. Fall that is neither bitter nor swift, but a brown girl bearing an idle gift. A smokiness so vague in the air you feel it rather than see it there. A brief white rime on the red clay road, and slow mules creaking a lazy load through endless acres of afternoon. A pine cone fire and a banjo tune, and a julep mixed with a silver spoon. This was his Georgia. This his share of pine and river and sleepy air, of summer thunder and winter rain. For wherever the winds of Georgia run, it smells of peaches long in the sun. And the white wolf winter, hungry and frore, can prowl the north by a frozen door. But here, we have fed him on bacon fat, and he sleeps by the stove like a lazy cat. Here, Christmas stops at everyone's house with a jug of molasses and green young boughs. And the little New Year, the weakling one, can lie outdoors in the noonday sun, blowing the fluff from a turkey wing at skies already haunted with spring. Oh, Georgia, Georgia.
He drank his fill of the air and then was just about to ride on again when... What was that noise beyond the sky? That harry of unseen cavalry riding the wind.
The horses, burning hooved, drove on toward the sea.
But where they had passed, the air was troubled and sick. There was a whisper moving that air all night, a whisper that cried and whimpered about the house where John Brown prayed to his God by his narrow bed.
Omnipotent and steadfast God, who in thy mercy hath upheaved in me Jehovah's rod and his chastising wrath. For 59 unsparing years thy grace hath worked apart to mold a man of iron tears with a bullet for a heart. Yet since this body may be weak with all it has to bear, once more before thy thunders speak, Almighty, hear my prayer. I saw thee when thou didst display the black man and his lord, and bade me free the one and slay the other with the sword. And should the Philistine defend his strength against our blows, the God who doth not spare his friend will not forget his foes. Lord, if we live, we free the slave, and if we die, we die. But thou hast digged thy saints a grave beyond the western sky. Get up, my hardy sons. From this time forth we are no longer men, but pikes and guns in God's advancing war.
Brown's raiders reached the Maryland Bridge of Harper's Ferry that Sunday night. There were 22 in all. 19 were under 30, 3 not 21. The bearded faces looked strange in the old daguerreotypes. They tied up the watchman and took the rifle works.
It was Patrick Higgins' turn. He was night watchman of the Maryland Bridge. A tough little Irishman, he came humming his way to his job. Halt ordered a voice. He got away with a bullet crease in his scalp and warned the incoming train. It was 1:30.
A moment later, a man named Shepard Hayward, free Negro, baggage master of the station, came looking for Higgins.
Halt called the voice again, but he kept on, not hearing or understanding. A rifle cracked. He fell by the station platform, gripping his belly.
Brown did not know at first that the first man dead by the sword he had thought of so often as Gideon's sword was one of the race he had drawn that sword to free.
And so the night wore away, indecisive and strange. The raiders stuck by the arsenal. Meanwhile, there was casual firing.
Meanwhile, the train passed over the bridge to carry its wild news of abolition devils sprung from the ground, to pillage Harper's Ferry with fire and sword. The alarm bell in Charlestown clanged.
In a score of sleepy neighboring towns, the same bell clanged.
God knows why John Brown lingered.
The firing now was constant.
Twice Brown sent asking a truce.
The second time, there went Stevens and Watson Brown, two of his men with a white flag. Stevens, shot from a window, fell in the gutter, horribly wounded. Watson Brown crawled back to the engine house that was the final fort.
A Mr. Brewer, one of Brown's prisoners, strolled out from the unguarded prison room into the bullets, lifted Stevens up, carried him over to the old hotel they called the Wager House, got a doctor for him, and then strolled back to take his prisoner's place, shifting the quid of tobacco in his cheek mechanically as he lifted up the dirty, bloody body of the man who stood for everything he most detested, and then, incredibly, going back to jail.
Fontaine Beckham, mayor of the town, went to look at Hayward's body with Patrick Higgins.
He had been mayor of the town for a dozen years, and now they were killing people here in his town.
Suddenly, the air struck him a stiff, breathtaking blow. "Oh," he said, astonished, took a step and fell on his face, shot through the heart.
The bars had been open all day, never to better business. When news of Beckham's death spread from bar to bar, it was like putting loco weed in the whiskey.
The armory yard was taken by a band of Beckham's avengers.
Only this remains to be told. When the drunken day reeled into night, there were left in the engine house 5 men, alive and unwounded of all the raiders.
When the blackened east began to tarnish with a faint gray stain that caught on the fixed bayonets of the Marines, Lee of Virginia, Light Horse Harry's son, observed it broaden, wanting to get his business done as swiftly and summarily as possible. The whooping crowd fell silent and scattered as a single man went out toward the engine house, a letter in his hand. Lee watched him musingly. A good man, Stewart. Now he was by the door and calling out.
The door opened a crack. Brown's eyes were there, over the cold muzzle of a cocked carbine.
The parleying began, went on and on while the crowd shivered. The parleying was done, the door slammed shut. The little figure of Stewart jumped aside, waving its cap, and the Marines came on.
Brown watched them come. His hand was on his carbine. "Sell your lives dear," he said. Brown fired and missed. A shadow with a sword leaped through the sun. The shadow lunged. Brown fell to his knees. And now it was over.
All but the long dying.
Cudjoe the Negro watched from the pantry the smooth glissades of the dancing gentry, his splay feet tapping in time to the tune,
while his broad face beamed like a drunken moon at candles weeping in crystal sconces,
wax floors glowing like polished bronzes,
sparkles glinting on royal Worcester, and all the stir and color and luster,
and Miss Louisa and Miss Amanda,
with hoop skirts wide as the front veranda.
There were the gentlemen, one and all, friends and neighbors of Wingate Hall.
Cudjoe watched and measured and knew them, seeing around and behind and through them, with the shrewd, dispassionate, smiling eye of the old-time servant in days gone by. He couldn't read and he couldn't write, but he knew quality, black or white.
Major Domo of Wingate Hall, proud of his white folks, proud of it all.
He looked for Clay in the dancing whirl. There he was, coming down the line,
hand in hand with a dark, slim girl whose dress is the color of light and wine, Sally Dupree from Appleton.
She had the Appleton mouth, it seemed, and the Appleton way of riding. But when she sorrowed and if she dreamed, something came out from hiding. She could sew all day on an Appleton hem and look like a saint in plaster. But when the fiddles began to play and her feet beat fast but her heart beat faster, an alien grace inhabited them and she looked like her father, the dancing master. The scapegrace, elegant French Dupree. come to the South on a luckless day.
With bright pace buckles sewed on his pumps and a habit of holding the ace at trumps. But slander is sinful and gossip wrong, and the candy memories are long.
The Appleton clan is a worthy clan, but we remember the dancing man. The girl is pretty, the girl seems wise. The girl was born with her father's eyes.
Now, a girl to be kind to, a girl we're lucky in. A girl to marry some nice Kentuckian, some Alabaman, some Carolinian. In fact,
If you ask me for my opinion, there are lots of boys in the northern sections, and some of them have quite good connections.
Cudgel watched thee. She went by. She's got a light foot, thought Cudgel. A light swift foot and a talking eye. But you'll need more than that, Miss Sally Dupree, before you proposal with young Master Clay. And as soon as the fiddles finish slewing, there's 16 things I ought to be doing. That trashy, high-yellow rat-pocket guinea was saying some Yankee named old John Brown has raised the devil back in Virginia and freed the niggers all over town. How come he want to kick up such a dizziness? Nigger business ain't white folks' business.
the nickeled lamp threw a wide yellow disk on the red tablecloth with the tasseled fringes. Jack Elliott put his book down with a slight impatient gesture. There was Mother knitting the same gray end of scarf, while Father read his same unaltered newspaper through the same old-fashioned spectacles with the worn bows. His father turned a creaking page of paper and cleared his throat.
The Tribune calls, he said, Brown's raid the work of a madman. Well, they're right, but
Mrs. Elliot put her knitting down. Are they going to hang him, Will?
it looks that way.
But, Father, when?
They have the right, my son. He broke the law.
But, Will, you don't believe.
A little spark lit Mr. Elliott's eye. I didn't say I thought that he was wrong. I said they have the right to hang the man, but they'll hang slavery with him.
Now it was Mother talking in a strange, iron-bound voice he'd never heard before.
I prayed for him in church last Sunday, Will. I pray for him at home here every night. I don't know. I don't care what laws he broke. I know that he was right. I pray to God to show the world somehow that he was right and break these southern people into knowing. And I know this. In every house and church all through the north, women are praying for him, praying for him. And God will hear those prayers.
He will, my dear, said Mr. Elliott gently. But what will be his answer?
In the Cupid courthouse there in Charlestown, the jail guards had carried in the cot where Brown lay like a hawk with a broken back.
Discredited farmer, dubiously involved in lawsuit after lawsuit. Sincere, of course, as all fanatics are, and with a certain minor prophet air that fooled the world to thinking him half great. But there is this. Sometimes there comes a crack in time itself. Sometimes the earth is torn by something blind. Call it the mores, call it God or fate. That force exists and moves. And when it moves, it will employ a hard and actual stone to batter into bits an actual wall and change the actual scheme of things. John Brown was such a stone. Unreasoning as the stone, he had no gift for life, no gift to bring life, but his body and a cutting edge. But he knew how to die. Listen now. Listen. The bearded lips are speaking now. Here is the voice already fixed with night. John Brown's speech.
In the first place, I deny everything but what I have all along admitted, of a design on my part to free slaves. Had I interfered in the matter, which I admit and which I admit has been fairly proved, had I so interfered in behalf of the rich, the powerful, the intelligent, or the so-called great, it would have been all right. I see a book kissed which I suppose to be the Bible, which teaches me to remember them that are in bonds as bound with them. I endeavored to act up to that instruction. I believe that to have interfered as I have done in behalf of his despised poor, I did no wrong, but right. Now, if it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life and mingle my blood with the blood of millions in this slave country, whose rights are disregarded by wicked, cruel, and unjust enactments, I say let it be done.
The voice ceased. There was a deep, brief pause. The judge pronounced the formal words of death. There was the noise of chairs scraped back in the courtroom.
A month between the sentence and the hanging. A month of endless visitors, endless letters. and Mrs. Russell came to clean his coat. A sculptor sketched him.
In Charlestown, meanwhile, there were whispers of rescue, but Brown told them, "I am worth now infinitely more to die than to live."
And lived his month so busily, a month of trifles, building up a legend, and letters in a pinched, firm handwriting, sowing a fable everywhere they fell.
The North, that had already now begun to mold his body into crucified Christs, hung fables about those hours, saw him move symbolically, kiss a Negro child, do this and that, say things he never said, to swell a sparse, hard outline of the event with sentimental omen. It was not so.
He left one last written message. "I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood."
The gallows stairs were climbed, the death cap fitted, the hatchet cut the cord, the greased trap fell.
John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave.
He will not come again with foolish pikes and a pack of desperate boys to shadow the sun.
John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave.
Slaves will be slaves next year in spite of the bones. Nothing is changed, John Brown. Nothing is changed.
There is a song in my bones. There is a song in my white bones.
I hear no song. I hear only the blunt seeds growing secretly in the dark entrails of the preparate earth.
Bind my white bones together. Hollow them to skeleton pipes of music. When the wind blows from the budded spring, the song will blow.
No, John Brown's body lies a mouldering, a mouldering.
My bones have been washed clean, and God blows through them with a hollow sound.
I hear it now. Faint, faint as the first droning flies of March. Faint as the multitudinous tiny sigh of grasses underneath a windy side.
It will grow stronger.
It has grown stronger. It is marching on. The phantom drum diminishes. The year rolls back. It is only winter still, not spring. Nothing is changed, John Brown. Nothing is changed, John Brown.
A smoke-stained Stars and Stripes droops from a broken toothpick, and 90 tired men march out of fallen Sumter to their ships, drums rattling and colors flying. General Beauregard is a pose of conquering courtesy.
Lincoln, 6'4" in his stocking feet, the landman, knotty and tough as a hickory rail, whose hands were always too big for white kid gloves, whose wit was a coonskin sack of dry, tall tales, whose weathered face was homely as a plowed field. Abraham Lincoln, who padded up and down the sacred White House in nightshirt and carpet slippers, the low clown out of the prairies, the ape buffoon, the small-town lawyer, the crude, small-time politician. Lincoln shambled into the cabinet meeting and sat ungainly and awkward, and then that mind turned to business.
It was the calling of 75,000 volunteers.
North and south they assembled, one cry and the other cry.
And both are ghosts to us now, old drums hung up on a wall. But they were the first hot wave of youth too ready to die.
And they went to war with an air, as if they went to a ball. Georgia, New York, Virginia, Rhode Island, Florida, Maine.
Pineywood squirrel hunter, and clerk with a brand new gun. Thus they were marshaled and drilled, while spring turned summer again.
Until they could stumble toward death at Garter Snake, Crooked, Bull Run.
Wingate stood in his room at night, between the moon and the candlelight. He stood there a moment, wondering.
North Star, wasp with a silver sting. Blue Nose Star on the Yankee banners, we're coming against you to teach you manners. With cannon that dance to a Dixie chorus, and the tiger lily of summer before us, to pull you down like a torn bandana and drown you deeper than the savannah.
And still, while his arrogance made its cry, he shivered a little, wondering why. There was his uniform, gray as ash, the boots that shone like a well-rubbed table, the tassels of silk on the colored sash, and sleek black whistle down in the stable, the hussif stitched from a beauty's fan, the pocket Bible with mother's writing, the saber never yet fleshed in man, and all the crisp new toys of fighting. And yet what happened to men in war? Why were they all going out to war?
Sally Dupre. Sally Dupre, eyes that are neither black nor gray, why do you haunt me night and day? There are too many beds where I have slept for a night unweeping to quit unwept. Why have you taken my heart from me? I am not justice nor loyalty. The little women are easier. The easy women make lighter love. I will not take your face to the war. I will not carry your cast-off glove.
So Wingate pondered in Wingate Hall, and hated and loved in a single breath, as he tried to unriddle the doubtful scroll of war and courage and love and death.
It was noon when the company marched to the railroad station. The town was ready for them. The streets were packed. There were flags and streamers and pictures of Lincoln and Hamlin. The bad little boys climbed up on the trees and yelled. The good little boys had clean paper collars on. Somebody fastened a tin can full of firecrackers to a yellow dog's tail and sent him howling and racketing the length of the street. There goes Jeff Davis, yelled somebody. The color guard with the stiff, new, flapping flag, and the ranks and the ranks and the ranks. The amateur blue, wavering ranks in their ill-fitting tight coats, shoulders galled already by their new guns. They were 3 months men. They drilled in civilian clothes till a week ago. 3 cheers for Abe Lincoln! Hooray! 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 3 groans for old Jeff Davis and the dirty Reb. Jack Elliott, marching, saw between blue shoulders a blur of faces. But they were all faces he knew. There was mother and father and the house. He called to them, the station. The engineer wore a flag in his coat lapel. The engine had "On to Richmond" chalked all over it.
Hey, close up, man!
Oh, my God, somebody let my dog out. Maybe he got out by himself. No, down there. Down, good dog. Down, boy. Down, I say.
If you take a flat map and move wooden blocks upon it strategically, the thing looks well and the blocks behave as they should. The science of war is moving live men like blocks and getting them into place at a fixed moment. But it takes time to mold your men into blocks, and the flat maps turn into country where creeks and gullies hamper your wooden squares. They stick in the brush, they're tired and rest, they straggle after ripe blackberries, and you cannot lift them up in your hands and move them. It is all so clear on the maps, so clear in the mind. But the orders are slow. The men in the blocks are slow. The general loses his stars, and the block men die in unstrategic defiance of martial law.
The day broke hot and calm before the stone bridge. A Union gun opened fire. Jack Elliott heard the guns with a knock at his heart when he first heard them. They were going to be in it soon. How would it feel? They were firing. Well, that was all right, just fire as you fired a drill. But was anyone firing at them? A man down the line fell and rolled flat with a minor coughing sound and then was quiet. Jack Elliott felt that cough in the pit of his stomach a minute. After a while, they all got up and marched on. The only funny thing was leaving the man.
It is fight and run away all day. The block plan is lost. There is no plan anymore. Only blood-stained and blackened men. The South gathers for a final charge. The charge sweeps the plateau. For a moment, the Union line is a solid crescent again. A crescent of porcupine pricks of steel. Then a crescent of sand. Then spilt sand streaming away. There is no panic at first. It is merely a moment when men have borne enough and begin to go home.
Wingate felt a frog in his throat as he patted Black Whistle's reeking coat. The road and the bushes all about were cluttered with relics of Yankee rout. Haversacks spilling their shirts and socks, a burst canteen and a cartridge box, rifles and cups trampled underfoot, a woman's locket, a slashed black boot stained and oozing along the slash, and a ripe pear crushed to a yellow mash. Who had carried the locket and munched the pear? And why was a dead cat lying there, stark and grinning, a furry sack with a red flannel tongue and a broken back? You didn't fight wars with a tabby cat? He found he was telling the Yankees that. Back in the pine woods, clear and far, a bugle sang like a falling star.
Horace Greeley has written Lincoln an hysterical letter. He has not slept for 7 nights in New York. On every brow sits sullen, scorching, black despair. He pleads for an armistice, a national convention, anything almost on any terms to end this war. Only Lincoln, awkwardly enduring, confused by 1,000 counsels, is neither overwhelmed nor touched to folly. Defeat is a fact, and victory can be a fact. His huge, patient, laborious hands start kneading the stuff of the Union together again. The dough didn't rise that time. Maybe it will the next time. God must have tried and discarded a lot of experiment whirls before he got one even good enough to whirl for a minute. Down in the South, another man, most unlike him, but as steadfast, the man they called Evacuation Lee, begins to grow taller and to cast a longer shadow.
This is Eliot's tune. This is no tune but his. By Pittsburgh Landing, the turbid Tennessee sucks against black, soaked piles with soil-colored water. That country is huge and disorderly even now. In '62, it was shaggy with wilderness still. Stretches and stretches where roughly chinked log cabins stood in a wisp of open.
The forest, hewn away from the painful clearing, but waiting to come back to crush the crude house with a chant of green, with tiny green tendrils curling.
This is Eliot's tune. This is no tune but his.
Milora Villas, rising by candlelight, looked at herself in the bottom of a tin basin and wished that she had a mirror. Now spring was here, she could kneel above the well of a forest pool. She looked at the eyes, and the eyes looked back at her. But just when it seemed they could start to talk to each other. What are you like? Who are you? A ripple floored the deep glass, and the shadow trembled away. If she only had a mirror, maybe she'd know something. She didn't know what, but something important. They'd never get a mirror while there were hiders. They were bound to be hiders as long as the war kept on. She was 17. She'd seen a lot of places, a lot of roads. Pop was always moving along. She mustn't call him Pop. That was movers' talk. She must call him Father. Father used to read Latin. They weren't white trash. She knew how to read and figure. But she liked it this way. She even liked being hiders. It was exciting, especially when the guns coughed in the sky as they had all yesterday, when you knew there were armies tumbling all around you. An army must be fine to look at, but Pop would never let her do it or understand. An army or a mirror, She didn't know which she'd rather find, but whenever she thought of it, the mirror generally won. You could keep the mirror yourself.
This is Elliot's tune. This is no tune but his. Jack Elliott, least of any, expected attack. He woke about 5. Oh, this morning was Sunday morning. The bells would be jangling back home for church pretty soon. The girls would be going to church in their white Sunday dresses. Oh, he wanted to see a girl who washed her hair. Not one of the girls in the dirty blue silk wrappers with flags on their garters. He wanted to see a girl. He had to get up. He couldn't lie here and listen to Bailey and the rest of them snoring away. He started to put on his boots, looking over at Bailey. Bailey was bearded. Bailey was 32. The waking Bailey looked like a stupid horse. The sleeping Bailey looked like a dirty sack. Bailey called him Colonel and didn't mean it. Bailey had him tossed in a blanket once. He managed to leave the tent without waking Bailey. Somebody nearby in the woods took a heap of dry sticks and began to break them quickly, first one by one, then a dozen together. Elliot was running. His mouth felt stiff with loud words. Officers were yelling, the usual things that officers yelled. It was a surprise. The prisoners' column straggled along the road. It was night now, but the column still marched. But Bailey and Elliot had dropped to the rear of the column, planning escape. The next bend. No, there was light for a minute. Well, the next bend after. No, the guard's coming along. Rain began to fall. A drizzle at first, then faster. Then Bailey touched him. His feet stopped walking. They moved slyly toward the woods. They were foxes escaped. And then that awful molasses taffy voice behind them yelled, "Howled and howled." And then Bailey's voice, "Run like hell, Jack. They'll never catch you." He ran like hell. Elliot woke from a nightmare, and he heard the gorged, sweet pouring of water through infinite boughs, the hiss of the big split drop on the beaten leaf, the bird-voiced and innumerable rain, a wet quail piping, 1,000 soaked black flutes building a lonely castle of sliding tears. Elliot huddled closer under the tree.
Milora had to call the hogs that afternoon. You had to call them once or twice a month and give them food, or else they ran too wild. It wasn't the proper call, but the hogs knew. There was a scrambling noise at the edge of the woods. The gleaming call floated the air like a bright, glassy bubble, and Elliot, lost and desperate in the wood, heard it. He stumbled toward its music. The swine grunted and jostled. Milora watched them, trying to count them up. They were all there, she thought. She must be sure. She called again. No, something moved in the woods. She stared past the clearing, puzzled. So Elliot saw her beyond the swine, head lifted like a dark foal that listened softly for strangeness.
So Elliot swam back to life, swam back to warmth and the smell of cooking food. 6 days later, the world was back in its shape. He was well and strong. You didn't say who you were, she said. You just fell. You better tell who you are. Pop will want to know.
Melora's father watched them go off through the wood to get the water from the other spring, the big pail clanking between them. His hard mouth was wry with an old nursery rhyme, but his eyes looked somewhere beyond hardness. I know this girl. We are no bargainers, my daughter and I. We give what pleases us and when we choose. It is a habit of living.
The filled pail stood on a stone by the lip of the spring, but they had forgotten the pail. Melora turned. We ought to go back, she said in a commonplace voice. Not yet, Melora. You'll be going, she said. He could smell her hair. It smelt of leaves and the wind. He could smell the untaken whiteness of her clean flesh. He touched her shoulder, but still she gazed at the spring. Then after a while, she turned. The mirrored mouths fused into one mouth that trembled with the slow waters.
Melora, in the room she had to herself, because they weren't white trash and used to be Eastern, let the rain of her hair fall down in a stream, in a flood, on the white birch of her body. She was changed then. She was not a girl anymore. Her sharp, clear breasts were two young victories in the hollow darkness, and when she stretched her hands above her head and let the spun fleece ripple to her loins, her body glowed like deep springs under the sun. Nothing could change her now. She thought to herself, I don't know. I can't think. I ought to be scared. I ought to have lots of maybes. I can't find them. It's funny, it's different. It's a big pair of hands pushing you somewhere, but you've got to go. Maybe you're crazy, but you've got to go. It's rhymes. It's hurting. It's feeling a bird's heart beat in your hand. It's children growing up. It's being cut to death with bits of light. It's wanting silver bullets in your heart. I've got to go. She passed her narrow hand over her body once, half wonderingly. Then she slipped her dress back on and stole downstairs. The bare feet, whispering, made little sound. She knew the dark grass cool beneath her feet. She knew the opening of the stable door. It shut behind her. She was in darkness now.
Jack Elliott, lying in a warm nest of hay, stared at the sweet-smelling darkness with troubled eyes. He was going tomorrow. He couldn't skulk anymore. If he were Bailey, he'd keep Melora a night from the foggy dew and then go off with the sunrise to tell the tale sometimes for a campfire yarn. But he wasn't Bailey. He heard something move and rustle in the close darkness. What's that? He said. He got no answering voice, but he knew what it was. Melora, he said. He wasn't going away when he went to the wood. He told himself that. They'd broken the dime together. They'd cut the heart on the tree. There ought to be a preacher in a gold ring and a wedding dress. Only how could there be? He told himself, I'm all right. I'm not like Bailey. I wouldn't sleep with a girl who'd never slept with anybody before and then just go off and leave her. All he knew was he was sick for a room and a red tablecloth with tasseled fringes, where a wife knitted on an end of scarf and father read his paper through the same old-fashioned spectacles with the worn bows. He started awake. He'd been walking through dreams. He saw the high road below him. He wiped his face. He looked down toward a bridge. There were men on horses and a round stick jabbed in his back. And a slow voice said, "Reach for the sky, Yank, or I'll naturally drill you." "You're the hell of a scout," said the voice. "I could have picked you off 10 minutes ago." His hands flew up. This was Elliot's tune.
Strike up for Wingate's tune. Strike up for Sally Dupre.
Strike up for the April moon and the rain on the lilac.
For Wingate Hall in its pride once more, for the branch of myrtle over the door, because the men are back from the war.
The slaves in the quarters are buzzing and talking. All through the winter their haunts were walking. But now the winter's over and broken. The sun shines out like a loving token. There's going to be mixins and mighty doings, chicken fixins and barbecuings.
The little black children with velvet eyes tell each other tremendous lies. They play at Manassas with guns of peeled willow stalks from the river field, chasing the Yanks into Kingdom Come while one of them beats on a catskin drum. They're happy because they don't know why. They scare themselves, pretending to die. But all through the scare, and before and after, their voices are rich with the ancient laughter, the Negro laughter, the blue-black rose, the laughter that doesn't end with the lips but shakes the belly and curls the toes and prickles the end of the fingertips.
Up through the garden, in through the door, the undercurrent of laughter floats. It mounts like a sea from floor to floor, a dark sea covering painted boats. It spills like a wave in the crowded kitchen, where the last good sugar of Wingate Hall is frosting a cake like a polar highland. And fat Aunt Bess in her ice-wool shawl spends the hoarded knowledge her heart is rich in on oceans of trifle and floating island. Fat Aunt Bess is older than time, but her eyes still shine like a bright new dime, though 2 generations have gone to rest on the sleepy mountain of her breast. The matriarch of the weak and the young, the lazy, crooning, comforting tongue. She has had children of her own, but the white-skinned one's a bone of her bone. Curious blossom from bitter ground, master of masters, who left you bound? Who shall unravel the mingled strands or read the anomaly of your hands? They have made you a shrine and a humorous fable, but they kept you a slave while they were able, and yet there was something between the two that you shared with them and they shared with you. Graciousness founded on hopeless wrong, but queerly living and queerly strong. There were 3 stout pillars that held up all the weight and tradition of Wingate Hall. One was Cudjoe, and one was you, and the third was the mistress, Mary Lou.
Mary Lou Wingate, as slightly made and as hard to break as a rapier blade. Let us look at her now. Let us see her plain. She loved her hands, and they made her vain, the tiny hands of her generation that gathered the reins of the whole plantation. She was at work by candlelight. She was at work in the dead of night, guiding the cooking and watching the baking, the sewing, the soap and candle making, the darning, the brewing, the lady daughters, the births and deaths in the Negro quarters. She was often mistaken, not often blind, and she knew the whole duty of womankind, to take the burden and have the power, and seem like the well-protected flower, to hate the sin and to love the sinner, and to see that the gentlemen got their dinner ready and plenty and piping hot, whether you wanted to eat or not, and always, always to have the charm that makes the gentleman take your arm, but never the bright, unseemly spell that makes Strange gentlemen love too well once you were married and settled down with a suitable gentleman of your own. She knew her Bible and how to flirt with a swan's down fan and a brocade skirt, for she trusted in God. But she liked formalities, and the world and heaven were both realities. In heaven, of course, we should all be equal. But until we came to that golden sequel, gentility must keep to gentility where God and Breeden had made things stable, while the rest of the cosmos deserved civility, but dined in its boots at the second table. This helped Mary Lou to stand up straight, for she was gentle, but she could hate. The Yankees were devils, and she could pray for devils, no doubt, upon Judgment Day. But now in the world she would hate them still and send the gentlemen out to kill. Let us look at her now. Let us see her plain. She will never be quite like this again. Her house is rocking under the blast, and she hears it tremble and still stands fast, but
this is the last. This is the last.
The last of the wine and the white cornmeal.
The last high fiddle singing the reel.
Last of the silk with the Paris label.
The last blood thoroughbred safe in the stable.
Death has been near, and death has passed.
But this is the last. This is the last.
But the house is busy, the cups are filling to welcome the gentleman back from killing. Everyone talking, everyone scurrying, upstairs and downstairs, laughing and hurrying.
War is a place, but it is not here. The peace and the victory are too near.
So Wingate found it, riding at ease, the cloud edge lifting over the trees. Saw it completely, saw it gleam, the full-rigged vessel, the sailing dream. No longer a house, but a conjure stone that could hate and sorrow and hold its own. But there was a whisper in his ear that said what he did not wish to hear. This is the last. This is the last.
Hurry, hurry, this is the last. There is no future, there is no past. Hurry, hurry, this is the last.
This is the last. This is the last.
Sally Dupre and Wingate talk with the music.
The dance, such a lovely dance. If I see you across a room, I will go to you. If you see me across a room, you will come to me. And yet we hate each other.
You dance so lightly. I do not hate you. I love you. But you must take me. I must break you first for a while, and you must break me, so we hate each other.
That is good music. It beats in the head. It beats in the head, it beats in the head, it ties the heart with a scarlet thread. This is the last, this is the last. Hurry, hurry, this is the last. I do not care, I am Wingate still, and I am yours while the fiddles spill. My will has a knife to cut your will. You are my foe and my only friend. You are the steel I cannot bend, but Wingate Hall must tumble down, tumble down, tumble down. Oh, Wingate Hall must lie in the dust, and the wood rot, and the iron rust, and the vines crawl over the broken bust, before we meet without hate or pride, before we talk as lover and bride.
Yes, it's good music. Hear it lift. It is too mellow, it is too swift. I am dancing alone in my naked shift. You are my lover, and you my life, my peace and my unending strife, and the edge of the knife against my knife. We are linked together for good and all, but you are married to Wingate Hall, and Wingate Hall must tumble down, tumble down, tumble down, before the knives of our enmity are buried under the same green tree. Wingate Hall must tumble down, an idol broken apart, before I sew on a wedding gown and stitch my name in your heart.
Now the scene expands. Let us look at the scene as a whole. How are the game boards chalked and the pieces set? General McClellan has marched his men at last from their camps in a great movement. There are many gates he can try. There is the Valley Gate and the Old Manassas Way, But he has chosen to ferry his men by sea to that ragged half-island between the York and the James, and thrust a long slant arm from Fortress Monroe northwest to Richmond. The roads are sticky and soft.
Army of the Potomac, advancing army, city boy, farmhand, bounty man, first volunteer, old regular, drafted recruit, paid substitute, confused, huge weapon forged from such different metals.
Black months of war, hard-featured, defeated months. What is your tale for this army?
Let us read the old letters a while. Let us try to hear the thin, forgotten voices of men forgotten, crying out of torn scraps of paper, letters and notes scribbled and smudged on aces, on envelope backs.
It is cold.
It is wet.
We marched till we couldn't stand up.
We hope this general's good. We hope he can make us win. We'll do all we can.
I felt sick last night. I thought I was going to die, but Jim rubbed me and I feel better.
Voices of boys and men, homesick, stubborn, talking of little things.
We get better food. I'm getting to be a good cook. The food's bad.
There are only 3 professed Christians in my whole regiment. I feel sad about that.
It's muddy. It's cold. We lost the battle.
The general was drunk.
And over in stiff patriotic phrases.
I am resigned to die for the Union, Mother.
If we die in this battle, we will have died for the right. There's just one thing. I hope I die quick. I hope I don't have to die in the hospital.
There is one thought that to me is worse than death.
This they say over and over.
It is the thought of being buried as they bury us here after a battle. Sometimes they barely cover us.
And through it all, the deep diapason swelling.
It is cold. We are hungry. We marched all day in the mud. We could barely stand when we got back into camp.
There are times of good food and times of campfire jokes.
The mail came.
Thanks for the papers.
We put on a show last night. You ought to have seen Jim Wheeler in Box and Cox.
Our little band of Christians meets often now, and the Spirit moves in us strongly. Praise be to God.
The president reviewed us 2 days ago. You should have seen it, Father. It was majestic.
We got the tobacco.
The socks came.
All that. But still the deep diapason throbs under the rest.
The cold, the mud. We were beaten again in spite of all we could do.
When will we find a man who can really lead us?